Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to talk a little bracketology on Thursday morning. It's March the 2nd. We are getting close to tournament time, Blake. And I did a lot of number crunching yesterday. I didn't get all the way down to the very bottom, but close enough to where I got an idea. I remember in bracketology, it's not just the teams and their resumes, but the teams around them. And let's start at the top where Alabama's been a one seed for a while. I think, Blake, at this point, there's only two questions with Alabama. It's, can they drop off the one seed line?
No.
And are they the tournament's number one overall seed? I think, honestly, probably that's Kansas right now because Kansas got 15 quad one wins, which is incredible. But I'm finding it hard to find a scenario in which Alabama drops off totally. I mean, I guess could be losing to A&M.
No.
And could also be, well,
No.
I mean, no, I was going to, there's an and there and losing a first run SEC tournament game, but I think it would have to be both. Even then, maybe not.
Even then, they're a number one seed. I don't see it changing. And I jumped in there to say that because I truly don't think there's a scenario where that happens. Even if they lose to A&M, great. They wouldn't be the number one overall seed maybe at that point. But their body of work would still be better than the teams behind them. If they lose their first round SEC tournament game, I don't know who that would be to. Guess what? The committee has made it loud and clear. They don't put a lot of value into the tournament, especially if you're a seed that high already. And so I don't see it at this point. I think Alabama's absolutely locked for number one seed.
Yeah, I think you've got right now probably 6 teams in contention for one seeds: Kansas, Alabama, Houston, Purdue, Baylor, UCLA. Outside of that, I just don't think it's humanly possible. Maybe Arizona, but I think that's probably or Marquette, but I think those are probably long shots at this point. So just trying to cover all the bases here.
If Texas beats Kansas on Saturday, wins the Big 12 tournament, I suppose that's a possibility, but I still think they would have some work. I just don't know if that would get them ahead of Alabama.
Well,
honestly.
yeah, Texas has already got 8 losses. Has there ever been a one seed with that many losses?
Yeah, but if you look at kind of how the bracket falls, Texas is technically, for some people, considered like the second number 2 seed right now. So I don't know that it's that crazy to think, but it would take a lot for that to happen. So,
yeah, I think. Didn't Texas lose to TCU last night, first of all?
Well, yeah, they did. But
so that's probably a little bit outdated because I have this. Here's my top 6 in order: Kansas, Alabama, Houston, Purdue, Baylor, UCLA.
Yeah, I'm just saying, look, all I'm saying is in the scenario of if they beat Kansas, who we are projecting as a number 1 seed, and let's say they win the Big 12 tournament, and then they beat Kansas again, right? Like, then perhaps, but I'm with you. I don't see it happening. I'm throwing a team's name in there if you're just looking at what if scenarios, like wild scenarios that could play out. But that's all that to say, Texas isn't jumping Alabama. So.
Yeah, and if your criticism is we're nitpicking, then yes, we're guilty. We're just trying to cover all our bases with all potential scenarios. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. That's with Tennessee. Tennessee, I've got is the top 3 seed right now, but the Vols probably have a case for a 2 seed. I mean, I've got Tennessee, Texas, and Kansas State right together. Of course, we know Tennessee beat Texas. But boy, the resumes down the line are super similar. I guess the biggest thing that jumps off the page in comparing those 3 teams, Texas has got 10 quad 1 wins, which is more than Kansas's 9 and Tennessee's 7. Tennessee's got 3 quad 2 wins. 3 quad 2 losses. Kansas State's got 1 and Texas has got none. None of those 3 teams have lost games in quad 3 or 4. That's kind of how I differentiate it. And yes, I know that Tennessee beat Texas, and that matters to some degree, but you've got to compare these teams to the field and not to themselves unless it's a case where you can truly isolate those teams and break the tie. And so that's kind of how I arrived where I did with Tennessee. Point number 2, this is not Tennessee because it won't have Zakai Ziegler. However, Josiah Jordan-James has missed a lot of time. Julian Phillips has missed a lot of time. Blake, God help you for the committee. You try to sort that injury situation out.
I mean, that's the thing. Like for them, I don't know how you do it because not only have you had to look at that for the entire season, but now you have to look at it with one of their best players not going to be playing the rest of the season. So yeah, it's a hard thing to do. But here's what Tennessee has going for them, folks, and this will come up again. Tennessee has scored 2,158 points this season. They have given up 1,702. That is a differential of, let me see if my math is correct here, 456 points. So that's a nice scoring margin boost, right? Like I think that tells you a little bit of something about a team's overall strength. And that's something we brought up before. It should, some people say, well, it shouldn't matter how much you win by, but it does matter. And I think when you look at some of the games, and look, two of those games, right, are against South Carolina, where they just blew them out by 40 something. But, go back to the non-conference schedule. So they even beat Kansas by 14. Obviously they beat Mississippi State by 34. Let's not forget that either. Mississippi State looks like a tournament team right now. They beat them by 34. So those kind of things that I think you have to look at. Again, a double-digit win over Texas. They beat Alabama. They beat Arkansas by 18. So that's kind of what has stood out with Tennessee. And remember, the bulk of their losses have been very, very close. And so I think that's why if you're trying, if you're wondering why Tennessee is where they are with this many losses or whatever, that's why. It's because when you really take the full body of work, Tennessee they should be where they are. Just based on, again, their actual performance, but the injury situation and all that will be interesting for them.
Yeah, you take away two buzzer-beating losses, Tennessee may be in that conversation for one seed, but
absolutely,
it's what you do and not the what ifs, unless it's injuries again. I don't know how the committee begins to sort that out because they're not the same team with Ziegler, but they also were not the same team without two guys they're going to have a lot. And by the way, I've said this many times. Tennessee's best 3 wins. Nobody's got 3 wins better, and it's arbitrary, but I don't think it's immaterial than beating Texas and Alabama and Knoxville and then Kansas on a neutral floor. And also good wins over Maryland neutral court, Arkansas at home, Southern Cal neutral floor, Auburn home, and sweeps in Mississippi State. So we're ready to move on to the next team, which that's where it gets interesting.
I think we
maybe
are.
Not too interesting.
I just want to recall that number I said. Just remember, Tennessee has only given up 1,702 points this season. They're giving 56.7 points per game allowed. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. All right, let's continue.
All right, Kentucky, another team that's had injuries to key players at points of the season. I've got Kentucky as of this morning, and I did some late night number crunching on Wednesday night and early this morning. I've got Kentucky, even after losing to Vandy, as the last 6 seed. I've got them behind TCU, Iowa, Michigan State, and Kentucky. Iowa, I don't know that anybody else is going to have Iowa as a 6 at this point. But after the string of wins that Iowa's had lately, in my mind, I was deserving of that. I may be in the minority there. But anyway, I don't think that loss was as damaging to Kentucky, maybe as people would have thought. But here's the resume for the Cats. They are 19th in resume, computer resume. That's averaging Ken Palm and strength of resume on ESPN. They are 18th in the predictives, which is BPI, Ken Palm, and Sagarin. So they're a little higher by the computer numbers. When you dig in a little bit, the Cats get dinged 20-10 overall, 11-6 in the league, only 5-4 on the road, which that's not, I say only, that's not awful for a team in that range for sure. You got Iowa State right there, which is 2-8 on the road, right in that same range with Kentucky. So it's not uncommon for teams to have losing records on the road, even really good ones. So Kentucky at least has got its head above water there, although it's 1-2 on a neutral floor. One of those losses being to Michigan State, which is right in that same range with the Cats. Quad 1, Kentucky 5-7. Quad 2, 6-0. This is where you have a little bit of an issue, or maybe not a little bit. 3-2 in Quad 3. That Vandy loss was Quad 3, and 6-1 Quad 4. Of course, that was South Carolina. Big wins. You see a lot of teams in this range that frankly done more work than Kentucky at beating tournament caliber teams. Kentucky's only beaten 3 teams that are for sure in the tournament. The sweep of Tennessee, A&M at home, and then also wins over bubble teams Texas A&M and Auburn. Or excuse me, bubble teams Mississippi State and Auburn, and also one over Michigan. Yeah, I mean, the computer numbers are fine, but when you dig in, 3 losses in quad 3 and quad 4, and only 3 wins against teams that we know are going to be in the field.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kentucky settles in at 6 or 7, probably, I guess. Because I think Kentucky's always a threat to win the SEC tournament. And how far could that push them up, even if we say the tournament doesn't matter? I think in those kind of scenarios, perhaps, move you up a seed line or something, depending on how they perform. And obviously, they have a big opportunity on Saturday against Arkansas. If they win that game on the road, that becomes a quad 1 win. So they'd add another to that list. But yeah, I mean, there are a couple things that stand out, like you said, having the 2 quad, 3 losses, which that would be Vanderbilt and Georgia, and then lose to South Carolina. It's just a strange thing there when you consider some of the losses for Kentucky. And how does the committee look at that versus the good wins? And so I think Kentucky's in an interesting spot. They're obviously a lock at this point, but their seeding could be much more fascinating than we think. I think just based on some of the stuff we just brought up in terms of what happens if Auburn doesn't make the tournament, what happens if Mississippi State doesn't make the tournament. Those kind of scenarios. Then how does your resume compare to others? And remember too, if you're like, well, Kentucky shouldn't be that far up. If you look at the resumes of the teams around them, they're not that overly impressive.
Everybody's got flaws.
That's what you have to remember. We're not comparing Kentucky to number 1 seeds. We're comparing Kentucky to 6 and 7 seeds. And when you actually look at it, we can pick apart those same teams. We can pick them apart the same things with those teams. So I think that's what you always have to keep in kind of the back of your mind when you do that is, there's nothing impressive about this resume. Well, the teams around them probably have very similar resumes. And so you're kind of nitpicking at that point. So yeah, my guess is Kentucky settles in at 6 or 7.
Yeah, I look heavily at the strength of resume, the KPI and ESPN, and I kind of average those, and that's always like for lack of a better idea, putting a number on it is a good idea of okay, what range a team falls in is a starting point, and then you look at the wins. But yeah, Kentucky definitely. The lower end losses and the top end wins are an issue for them. The computer's liking them is kind of their saving grace so far, but we'll see how the committee sorts it out. Okay, Blake, I've ranked these teams. What I do is when I do this, I look at teams and I rank them line by line, and I look at, okay, I got this team right in front of that team and that team right behind that team. And so I've got their records and their resumes right there together. I can compare them. I can move teams up a line or down the line. As of Thursday morning, I've got Kentucky as the number 24 overall seed for the tournament, followed by Iowa State, which is kind of hard to know what to do with for a number of reasons. Creighton, same thing. I've got Maryland at 27. I've got Texas A&M at 28, Duke 29, Missouri 30, Illinois 31, Providence 32, Arkansas 33. So let's talk about the SEC teams in this tier. A&M right now, I've got as the last 7 seed. Things that work against the Aggies are bad losses, 2 in quad 4 and number 256 strength of schedule out of the conference. Of course, we know A&M is battling or was battling for the regular season championship. Tremendous conference record, but A&M also sort of drew maybe the easy side of the SEC schedule. And again, we talked about Kentucky not having a lot of wins over teams that are in the tournament compared to the teams around them. A&M's kind of got the same issue. Home wins over Arkansas, Tennessee, a sweep of Missouri, and a sweep of Auburn for whatever that's worth at this point. Again, A&M kind of with the same issue as Kentucky with a couple of bad losses. And you look at some of the teams around them, especially Big 10, Big 12 territory, where they just beat more tournament caliber teams. That's kind of what's working against A&M. Look, Aggie's going to be solidly in the field, but I think the altitude is going to get hurt a little bit by those things.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, again, the Auburn thing is if you're A&M, you're rooting for a strong finish from Auburn here because I think you want them to get in the tournament. Because you did sweep them, and they swept Missouri. Obviously, got the win against Tennessee, win against Arkansas. So I mean, Auburn gets in the tournament. I think you feel a lot better. And I mean, I think there's a chance A&M beats Alabama on Saturday. And so, what does that do for your resume if that happens? I think that's a significant boost as well for a team like you said. It's got a pretty poor non-conference stretch schedule. Um, and I think that's going to be the interesting thing. I think that's the one. If you can get that one, then that's a huge boost. If you can just beat Alabama on Saturday, because then I think that gives you, when you start comparing to the teams around you, right? Like that's, hey, we got a victory over perhaps the top overall seed or a surefire number one seed. So I think that can be very valuable too. So that's a significant game from that standpoint from A&M. They're not playing for regular season title anymore, but I think there's some significance there just to give that resume another kind of boost in terms of a quad one win.
I've got Missouri on the 8 line this morning. Honestly, Blake, I think there's a case Missouri could be a 7. The resume average has got Missouri is what, the first 7, 25 overall. I know the predictives don't like Missouri. We've talked about that all year. Excuse me. Okay. We've talked about Missouri's clean sheet all year. Missouri does not have a loss outside of quad one. Missouri is 5-5 on the road, so nothing really bad there. Big wins, Missouri's got them at Tennessee, Kentucky, Iowa State, Arkansas, Mississippi State at home, Illinois on neutral court. Missouri's in at this point, and I think, Blake, I'm probably out there. I'm not going to say necessarily on an island, but I think Missouri, in my mind, is an 8 and could be a 7. Needs some bad loss avoidance, but man, there's not a lot of flaws to pick with Missouri. It's just the computers don't like the Tigers because they've been blown out of some games. The predictives don't, but the ones that are skins on your wall, Missouri is pretty much done very, very well, and that's where the committee's going to look.
Yeah, won some close games, even against teams in the non-conference. Gotten blown out and some losses. Yeah, that's why the computers don't love them. But I think we've always said for the last couple of weeks, Missouri is going to be one of the more interesting seeding cases, I think, for them. Because I know Missouri fans, trust me, I see it on Twitter. Every time I put the net rankings out, as I always say, it's not the end all be all. I'm just giving you what the net rankings are. And I know Missouri fans hate the net, and I completely get it and understand. But, it is a situation where it's part of the equation. It's not everything. But it does go beyond just the net and the computers. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens here. Just with looking at how this thing plays out for Missouri. If they beat Ole Miss on Saturday, like you said, I mean, you finish the season with a, knock on wood, Missouri fans again, a clean sheet in quad. 2, 3, and I mean, think about that. That's remarkable. If they are able to do that, but if you add in a loss to Ole Miss, then maybe that changes things a little bit. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, they've banked the good wins, and that's what we always say, and they've avoided the bad losses to this point. And even if you look at some of the scoring margins and don't love those, the computers we said probably don't. It's still a situation where I think that was the win at LSU was important because we said I think that's the one that got them in for sure. Can sort of exhale. Now it's just a matter of you don't want to put the committee in a position to slide you down a bit with a loss to Ole Miss or perhaps lose to someone else outside the tournament field in the SEC tournament. Then those are the scenarios that you're kind of looking at there for Missouri. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out, but be nice for them to get a win, I think, on Saturday to have that full clean sheet for the entire season. So.
Okay, folks, there was some weirdness in the video there. This is how excited we are about basketball this time of the year. We lose track of time. Yours truly forgot he had a radio spot. And so that accounts for me picking up the phone. We had to splice this together. Blake is rolling his eyes at me, and deservedly so. But anyway, I'm off the phone and back to talking basketball. And we pick back up with the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas, Blake, got an interesting resume. And this is where, my goodness, if you wish you could read the committee's mind, Arkansas would be a good test case, because Arkansas, goodness, the strength of resume computers like them, although they're split. Strength of resume on ESPN's got them at 41. KPI's got them all the way at 14. The predictives love them. BPI at 13. Ken Palm at 15. Jeff Sagarin at 12. So computers say, Arkansas, you're an NCAA tournament team. But there's some issues. 11 losses overall. 8-9 in the league. 2-8 on the road. That's awful. Just 3-8 in quad 1. A couple of quad 2 losses. A quad 3 loss. Big wins. San Diego State on the neutral floor. At Kentucky. Beat A&M and Missouri at home. Now, this is the point really from about Providence down. We're starting with Arkansas, which I've got at 33. Every team got some flaws here. So whatever flaws Arkansas has, it is also getting compared to some teams with some pretty big flaws themselves. So you've also got the Nick Smith Jr. factor, which I think the committee absolutely is going to consider. Blake, I think based on metrics, Arkansas is probably already in, maybe barring a loss on Saturday and maybe – I don't know how the brackets match up. Maybe a bad loss to an LSU or an Ole Miss would do it. I have no idea how the committee is going to sort through this, because there's a lot of things that scream Arkansas should be in regardless, and a lot of things that are red marks on the paper in terms of resume too.
Yep, but the good news for Arkansas is what the team's resumes look like behind them right now, and that's where we get into teams like Auburn and some people would say Missouri and different resumes. Now, I think we talk about the comparison point. You have Missouri ahead of Arkansas, and I can again. That's why I think these two are going to be the most fascinating from a seeding standpoint, because I could see this going a lot of different ways. But I think they're in, even if they lose, because here's what happens, right? This is going to test my ultimate theory. If they lose to Kentucky, they're going to finish 8-10 in the league. And again, people can say, well, that's not no matter. Why do you keep bringing it up? I'm not saying it will, but I'm telling you that that's going to be a discussion point that will be had if you're comparing resumes and trying to figure out where to put certain teams. The Nick Smith factor is, something that will come into play. And I think that's what you have to keep in mind with Arkansas. But if they lose Kentucky and lose first round of the SEC tournament, they will essentially be 8-11 in the league, right? Because you would have 8-10 regular season. You lose your first conference game in the tournament. So that may be, one that gets interesting. Not that, it's not going to leave them out of the tournament. I think they're in, but maybe it gets interesting from like, perhaps their seeding could surprise you a bit more than you would think. But ultimately, yeah, Arkansas is an interesting team because, like you said, the wins have been good, but just in comparison to some of the other resumes we talked about, they do only have 3 quad 1 wins right now. And, the good thing I think Arkansas is going for it, people brought this up, they've only played 2 quad 4 games, period. And I think that's where the computers too can like that a bit because, well, you haven't really played that many games in against the worst teams. So that I think helps obviously your overall just strength, I think of, schedule and all that. But yeah, I don't think we should underestimate or undersell the impact of the Nick Smith thing. Even if they, and that's the thing you could say, well, they've lost 2 in a row with him. They lost those other games with him, although he didn't play much in the first 2 that he came back. But that and the road record are probably the things that I would, push back and forth against. What's going to weigh the most there? Because the road record's not great. But they, I think, are still a different team when they have him on the floor. And certainly coming off a loss that was not good at Tennessee. But if they can just beat Kentucky on Saturday, I already think they're in. But that would sort of solidify
That would do it. Yeah.
That, well, I'm not even saying that would do it in terms of getting them in. I think that would do it in terms of, okay, now, you've got a little bit more to support on your resume, a sweep of Kentucky. so I think they really need to win that one, because I think that will give them a bit of a jump again compared to other teams. And also, what I'm going to say, that keeps them at 9-9 in the SEC, and kind of avoids any discussion of a losing record in your conference and all that stuff, which again is doable. I'm just pointing out the historical aspect of it, that it's only been done once so far. So
yeah, I think they beat Kentucky. I mean, there's always scenarios where they couldn't get in. I mean, a meteor hits the earth, or
they're in. Yeah,
a balloon gets shot down, or something. There's 15 conference. I mean, point is, I think if they win that one, I think people can sleep pretty well, because Arkansas is certainly going to be one of the best 40 teams in the country, and with Nick Smith, and everybody knows it. So 9-9 at that point, we'll with another quality win, we'll do it. So okay, here's where it gets trickier. Auburn 37 in the net, 33 in the resume computers, 32 in the predictives, 19-11 overall, 9-8 in the SEC, 4-8 on the road, 2-1 neutral, just 2-9 quad 1, 6-1 quad 2, 8-1 quad 3, and 3-0 quad 4. Good wins over Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi State at home, Northwestern on a neutral floor. That Northwestern win keeps getting a little bit better. I have not done my research on Auburn or Mississippi State in terms of the teams around them. And look, here's the teams they're going to be talked about with. It's probably Florida Atlantic, West Virginia, Southern Cal, Boise State, Nevada, Wisconsin, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, North Carolina, Michigan, Clemson, Utah State, Charleston. I mean, that's a lot of teams, guys, a lot of teams. And so I will have that research done, I think, by the next time we do it. But let's put it this way. Auburn, right in the middle of that pack of teams, along with State, which is 43 net, 46 in the resume computers, 41 in the predictives, 20-10 overall, 8-9 in the league, 4-7 on the road. Big win. State's better there. Marquette neutral, TCU, Missouri, A&M at home, Arkansas on the road. Strength of schedule out of conference, 235 for Mississippi State. That'll be a detriment, although, again, as I pointed out, 2 huge wins out of the league. Blake, how do we size up Mississippi State and Auburn? My opinion is I think each of them, with a win Saturday, would punch a ticket. Each of them, if they don't, there might be trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if either wins on Saturday, both win, whoever wins is in. It's very simple. Like that is the way it will be. Auburn plays Tennessee, huge win opportunity. Mississippi State plays at Vanderbilt, gets to that, 9-9 record in league play. And so, yeah, I think that's it. Like that's the formula for both of these. Otherwise, I mean, they're very close. And again, you can pick apart the resumes, but remember, you're not just comparing these two teams against each other. You're comparing them against the teams that are around them. And I think when you look at, look at a team like North Carolina, they play Duke on Saturday, right? And so,
yeah.
But if they beat Duke on Saturday, and then let's say, I mean, you can say that, but like, think about what that does. Like, if they beat Duke on Saturday, which that's in Chapel
They still
Hill,
don't have a quad 1 win, do they?
I'd have to look it up, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on North Carolina. But my point is, I think there's still, something there to where you don't want to put yourself in that position. Because remember, North Carolina did beat Virginia last week. Now they got a chance to beat Duke. What do they do in the ACC tournament? All those things. And so I just wouldn't want to put yourself in that position if you're Auburn and Mississippi State. That's all I'm saying. Because again, like you said, the teams around them, whether it's Oklahoma State, Wisconsin, Boise State, West Virginia, Nevada, Arizona State, teams like that. Yeah, I mean, for me, for Mississippi State and Auburn, it's very close right now. Like, they are probably among the last 5 teams in the field, would be my guess, 5 or 6. So you don't want to leave that margin for error, knowing a couple things, knowing there's other bubble teams who can increase the value of their resume, and knowing that there could very well be someone that still has a bid in a conference tournament. And so you got to remember those people are in play. So if you say you're like the 5th or 6th team into the field now, I think you have to sort of go ahead and angle that to believe, let's take about 4 other teams and put them in the field that you don't think are in right now. Then where are you, right? Like, then you're right there on that line. So I think that's how you have to look at it, knowing that some bids are going to get stolen. One of these first 4 out, next 4 out type teams are probably going to make a run to play their way into the field. And so they're trying to jump you. And that's why winning is the only thing that cures that, is you just have to win. If Auburn loses, if Mississippi State loses, then I think the setup is going into the SEC tournament, perhaps in both scenarios, needing multiple wins depending on what happens around them.
Yeah, this is the time of year where those teams on the bubble are right there together, and horrible losses and huge wins sort of have disproportionate impact. So next time we do this, we'll dive a little more into those. Spent late last night and yesterday afternoon crunching the numbers, but and trying to get everything updated, but you can only get so far before you run out of time. So that's kind of where we are. But we'll have that updated for you next time we do this, to be a little more precise on those back end teams. Blake, any parting thoughts on bracketology?
Do we want to mention Vanderbilt?
Oh, that's right.
About to say, what are you doing here? Like, I think we need to mention them at this point. But I'm not saying they're in. But
yeah,
you're gonna anger some people.
Okay, let me pull Vandy.
We can be quick. We can be precise here. But
yeah, look, here's Vanderbilt. The numbers as of this morning: 85 in the net, 24 overall strength of schedule, 116 non-conference strength of schedule, 17 and 13 overall. Actually, on the road, Vanderbilt 6-6, which is a feather in its cap there. Problem for Vandy: 2 quad 3 losses, 2 quad 4 losses. Big wins though: Tennessee, Arkansas, Auburn, Pitt all at home, Kentucky on the road. And I'm going to see where the resume computers have them this morning, because I think Vanderbilt will certainly move up with the win in Lexington last night. Look, Vanderbilt is still, as I would say it, on the bubble of the bubble, but beat Mississippi State, and maybe it gets interesting. Now, having said that, the problem for Vanderbilt is I think Liam Robbins is done for the year, Blake, and that is one of those things that if they are right there with some other teams, boy, will that ever be a tiebreaker, and that will not work in their favor. Fair or unfair, you're trying to get the best teams in the tournament. And I guess to complicate it, Vanderbilt won with Liam Robbins playing 2 minutes last night. Is that something that Vanderbilt can continue? I got some questions about that, because he is, I think, their best player by a factor of 2 or 3.
Yeah, I remember the earlier discussion about Tennessee, the margin of victory this year, points for, points allowed. I know you brought up the stat that Vanderbilt has outscored their opponents by 5 points this season, I think. And that's one of the reasons for the computers. Remember, I want to repeat this. I am not saying this is my opinion. I am telling you this is the formula of the computers. This is what they value, right? Scoring margin matters. And I still think it should matter even if you're not using computers. Like, it should still tell you something about a team. Yes, Vanderbilt has won a lot of close games, but give them credit. They've won those games. And I think that has to account for something. It doesn't account for as much in the computers as it does for the eye test. And so I think that's worth remembering. Is Vanderbilt playing like one of the teams that, should be in the tournament right now? Yes. But again, that's just what we're seeing right now. Were they playing like a team that should be in the tournament the first 22 games of the season? No. And so I think that's what we have to remember here when we look at their entire body of work. You are comparing it to everyone else around them. Do I think they actually have a better resume than some of the teams that probably are projected ahead of them, some of these bad bubble teams? Yeah, I think you can make that argument. But again, I think you have to keep it in the context of, it almost feels like everything is sort of evening out at this point, to where they did not do themselves many favors at all, basically, leading up to that 57-point loss to Alabama. But after that, they've tried to make up for that, and they've, again, a win over Tennessee, a win at Kentucky. I think for Vanderbilt, you're definitely rooting for Auburn to get in the tournament because that win looks better. So those are the kind of things I think you're rooting for now. Here, it's the formula still the same. You have to win. You have to keep winning. Like the LSU loss put you back a little bit, and that's at the time. It's an inexcusable loss. They could not afford to lose that game. They did. So now you're having to sort of play catch up again, almost like you did, that 5-game winning streak. You're playing catch up from what you did the 12 game or the 22 games before that. Now that one lost LSU, you can say, well, it shouldn't matter. LSU's 2-15 in the league. It's got to matter at some point. And so I think that's something that we have to remember. So the computers don't love them, but can they outplay the computers? Maybe not at this point. But I think if you just keep winning, I would not be surprised if Vanderbilt beats Mississippi State on Saturday. We go into the SEC tournament, and all of a sudden there's the thought that, hey, look at their path. They've just got work to do. The LSU loss put them in a position where they've got to win on Saturday. If they don't win on Saturday, there's no discussion. So,
yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt's sort of been playing itself in, or Vanderbilt's sort of been in elimination mode since the calendar flipped to February. I mean, it's almost like this is the George Mason or VCU going to the Final Four, and you're like, they can't do this, and then they keep winning a game. Yeah, okay, they can't do this, and then they win another game. They can't do this. They win another game. They still can't do this, and you look up and all of a sudden they're there. Look. The odds of Vanderbilt winning, according to Ken Palm, both Kentucky and Mississippi State, were 10%. But guess what? You get the win last night, and we use this term with Vandy. Now it's a coin flip on winning that last one. It's about a 50-50 game between Vandy and Mississippi State in Nashville. I mean, I say that. Liam Robbins won't be playing. I'm 99% sure. So who knows now? But anyway, it's one of those scenarios where it just seems impossible, and then every day you wake up and something new has happened, and Vanderbilt is still somehow managing to hang on the fringe of the conversation. Updated numbers, I looked this up. The predictive computers, KPI now Vandy at 52, strength of resume 55, so they still don't have them there. And also Vanderbilt lost a quad one win, even though it gained one. So now Vandy is 4-9 in quad one as Auburn has dropped out of quad one. So,
yeah. Well, Vandy fans versus the net, Missouri fans versus the net. Everyone dislikes the net except for Tennessee fans. Yeah. So I think the net has its own criteria. The net is not the end all be all. I don't want to have to repeat that again, but like that's just the way it is. It's a reference point for the committee. It's not everything, but the computer numbers, like it or not, carry weight. And that's just where people are in these rankings. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching Bracketology. We'll continue to do these as we get into conference tournament play. And before, best way to catch all those, hit that subscribe button. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.